and particularly focus on just an overview of my company, Enexys, which is based here in Cambridge. It was a spin out of the University of Cambridge several years ago, and has been moving towards commercialization over the last several years. My involvement being the last year, as we're about to roll out products into what I would call a smart solar environment, which certainly relates very much to a smart grid environment. In light of this, we have developed some very disruptive technology that we think will change the solar market significantly, at least a significant part of it, to evolve it in a different way and to bring it to a much more widespread use as solar will become more and more distributed distribution system, which fits with things that have been said here this morning. So Enexys is a key part of this early phase of the change of what I would call second generation solar or smart solar, and we expect to build a very large company and a very successful company over the next few years. Let me give you just a bit of background though about the solar, so we're all in the same frame. This chart is just showing the cumulative installations up through 2007, and about 8 gigawatts of power has been generated in solar, almost all of which is grid connect, and that's all I'm dealing with here today is grid connect. The growth rate, as you can see, has been pretty steady, about 35% compound, which is certainly a very, very significant business, but still a relatively small business. Lots of reasons why this is growing. Particularly, I'd like to emphasize about feed-in tariffs and subsidies, and also availability of financing to support large-scale growth in solar, which has been very important as you transition to 2008. Now, this chart is not a Kuhn chart. This is the installations that have occurred each year. And you can see where I've circled this. 2007 was the chart just previously shown. Installations of about 2 gigawatts. And then suddenly in 2008, it grew almost triple to nearly 6 gigawatts in 1 year. So this put an enormous demand on solar. It was heavily driven, as you can see in the pie chart, by the growth of Spain in terms of deployments and also Germany. A couple of key points about this: Spain grew by 500% in 1 year. Germany doubled. And interestingly, you can obviously see that Europe has dominated the deployment of solar PV installations in the world. The United States is very, very small compared to the rest of Europe, but probably growing very fast. In 2008, it grew about 80%, and we expect it will continue to grow heavily now, particularly in the change of administration and the emphasis on solar in the U.S. But it's an interesting way in which the market has evolved. Growing by such a huge amount has put enormous strain on the supply chain of solar. And for those who may be familiar with the industry, the availability of the photovoltaic material itself, such as solar cells, have been in a mode that is just build as much as you possibly can make because you can sell it. And this is now changing in the marketplace, of course, going into 2009. As Spain overbuilt, they created far too much incentive. They're mandated now to be no more than 500 megawatts, which will reduce them by 500%. And I think Germany will also probably shrink, or at least just stay the same. Whereas other countries, though, will very likely grow. So just to give you a bit of framework about how this relates to Enexys and what we're doing and how we see this evolving to a next generation of solar. Just a very brief outline. Some of you may know this intimately. This is a simple diagram showing how solar is installed. Basically, it's been where you put as much as many solar panels together, connected in DC strings, and even in large systems connected with one very large inverter that converts the DC electricity to AC in order to pump it into the grid. For a large system, that big string inverter could be something made by Siemens or other major companies. Runs at 99% efficient. It's the size of a truck. Requires a tremendous amount of maintenance and support. Even in small systems where the inverter could be much smaller than that, they still all have had a historical problem with a lot of maintenance and short lifetime. They will, on the average, only last about 10 years. They're only warranted for 5, but people typically buy extended warranty insurance. So in the life of the solar panels, which are 20 or 25 years before they degrade enough that you really need to replace it, you have to replace this inverter 2 or 3 times, so that's a big expense. And the industry has learned that as it initially focused on the highest possible efficiency, like 99% efficient in a very large inverter, and also focused on solar panels having the absolute lowest cost per peak watt, which is kind of the idealized perfect situation of high noon sun, no clouds, nothing disturbing anything. This then is an optimal solution under those ideal conditions. But the real world is not very ideal. Temperatures change dramatically. And they learned that with large systems, for example, run by a big, large inverter, that during those perfect conditions it runs fine, but about 20% of the time it's not working at all because of even things that you would not first imagine, like cloud banks moving over, causing changes of intensity across the solar array, the big array that could cover acres and acres. Or in a small system like on your roof, if you had one of these in a small system on the roof of your house, one string with say 10 or 15 or 20 panels, a leaf blowing on one of the panels will cause the whole system to shut down or to suboptimally perform, or any kind of dirt or accumulation, or most interestingly a shadow, like a shadow from a chimney across a small corner of one of the panels will cause the entire string to malperform dramatically, and you don't get much energy. So this idea of make it cheap and make maximum efficiency, which was first thought to be the most important thing, is determined to be really suboptimal in terms of economic performance, and people have been very disappointed. So herein lies what Enexys is about, which is putting an inverter, we would call a microinverter. See in the upper right-hand picture. Probably could have shown a 5-pound note instead of a ball of milk, but forgive me for that. And you put one with each panel, and you create then effectively an AC module or an AC panel that produces inherently at the panel 240 volt AC current that's ready to go into the grid. The advantage of this is that it's what I call plug and play deployable. You can buy one, take it home, put it on your roof, put it in your garden, or in places where the grid is not very reliable, lots of flat roofs. It's very, very cheap and simple to put it on your roof. And you can plug it in the wall. We do it all the time. It does not require some special exotic technologies about wiring. For a commercial system, it requires an electrician to wire it into your electrical network, but it's often done, especially in other countries, where it is in fact legal, and including companies that you might not think it would be legal, like Switzerland. You can plug it in the wall. Each panel now is independent. You can buy 5 and put them on your garage and say, well, it's fantastic, let's put another row. You don't have to throw away the old equipment. And a key element of this is the microinverter will last as long as the solar panels themselves, 20 or 25 years. That technology, the idea of this, is not something that Enexys invented. This has been tried in the past. But technology is prevented from being deployed. As you might well imagine, the outside environment, if you mount a solar inverter like this with the solar panel, it's obviously exposed to a lot of rain, ice, and snow, and various kinds of weather. But especially the backside of the solar panel, even in a fairly moderate temperature, ambient temperature, can be extremely hot. The backside of modules, typically sitting on a roof here in Cambridge, will reach 80 degrees centigrade because of the thermal effect of the black body of the solar panel. So every historic attempt to try and do this has failed because the electronics failed. The key to that failure has been problems with that plague all of these inverters, in that they, I've skipped ahead, but they contain low lifetime components, and we'll solve that, and I'll show you a slide. Also, then, what's important though about the concept of having an AC module, is that it becomes much, much simpler to install and plant. It requires much less complex labor. You don't require electricians that understand DC current to pull around on your roof, which is actually quite dangerous with a normal stream system. You have 700, 800, 900 volts of DC at 5 amps, which is obviously deadly. Once you plug it in, you can't unplug it. If the sun goes down, unplug it, which is rather inconvenient because it'll arc with the DC current. So it makes the installation much simpler, and this has a lot of impact about small systems and consumer systems. Just to give you a depiction on the left is a conventional system. You can see the module itself, the solar panel, it's about $3 a watt. Inverters, string inverters, including buying an extra one, is about 75 cents a watt. But the installation is really high. Every household or every small building or whatever is a unique installation, and it's very high. It's much or more than a third of the total cost. If you can simplify that by making it much less sensitive to things like shadowing before you plan to put it on the roof, where you essentially can't make a mistake. Put it right in the shadow of the chimney, and sure that particular module won't produce as much as it would, but it doesn't have any impact on the rest of them. Then you make it very simple to install to reduce the cost, and you have lower lifetime costs because it lasts 20 or 25 years. So it makes a big difference in the cost of about 20%. It also harvests more energy, or the yield is higher, which is, depending upon the situation, is 5 or 10 or even more percent. So the sum total is you get 20 or 25% reduction in your solar cost. And that makes a big difference in how much actually gets deployed. I mentioned reliability, also low cost, high performance are required in order to do this. Reliability being the biggest difficult problem which we developed technology to resolve. I won't dwell on this chart at all, but just to give you just a brief idea. The picture on the left, and particularly outlined in red, the blue devices are electrolytic capacitors. All such converters like this, even whether they're small or large, whether they're several hundred watts or thousands of watts, require storage of a lot of charge energy. And that charge density is so high that it requires a technology that is very high density in storage. Electrolytic capacitors are often used, or typically used, almost always used. They're very unreliable at high temperatures, so they fail. We've developed a technology in this core of our patents that allows us to store about 1,000 times less charge. Therefore, we can use a reliable technology for storage, which changes the whole lifetime of the inverter. A bit just about applications. These stack charts are just showing at the very bottom extremely small systems. It might be just one panel, all the way up to power plants that could be megawatts. And it just shows the idea that while we see so much about pictures and so forth, often pictures of Spain, I want to think about, of acres and acres and acres of land out in the countryside covered by solar panels, that in fact half the market is small systems, less than 30 kilowatts, which are households and small buildings, which are all over the place. And that's an important feature. And that's where installation cost is very high, and where an increase in standardization make a big difference in deployment cost and the growth. Inverters are a very big business. They're about $2 billion today, going to over $6 billion by 2013. So we're participating in a large market. And just a brief chart that comes out of our financial plan. We expect to achieve about 9% capture about 9% of that entire inverter marketplace by 2013. Which products like we make, which are called microinverters, will achieve about 25% market share, which will be predominantly in the smaller systems. Although increasingly, for a number of reasons, we're getting a lot of inquiries from very large systems operators. There's also an important change in the market itself. Solar has been one that's driven by what I call component suppliers, making all they can make and having problems with enough capacity. And so the people that make modules sell to installers. The end user doesn't have a clue who they are. The brand name doesn't mean anything, like SunTech, SunPower, Gimli Solar don't mean anything to the consumer. People on the right are inverter manufacturers. They're dominated by German companies like SMA. That's now changing to become consolidated to a more vertically integrated supply chain. having a microinverter that then enables an AC module to be a plug-and-play solution provides a way of vertically integrating and providing brand identity for some of these major customers, particularly module manufacturers who have billions of dollars in annual revenue, and no one's ever heard of them from an end-user point of view. So it's a part of the change that's going on and how Enexys could be a piece of this. Well, just in summary, certainly it's a growth industry. Last year was $40 billion. 8 gigawatts, or now about 14 gigawatts of power actually out there. Still very small, tiny fraction of the total that's there, so it's still growing tremendously. Feed-in tariffs and subsidies and availability of financing are, in fact, very, very key to the growth of solar. But we will achieve solar grid parity over the next 2 to 5 years, depending upon where you are and the cost of propulsion of energy. The change in the supply chain is dramatic after having such a huge growth in 2008, which taxed the industry greatly. It will shrink now, and that will change the structure of the industry in some fundamental ways. And then one of the ways people react, the prices are coming down. So the strain on suppliers is heavy as their profits are being taxed very heavily by this process, but it's also, as they bring prices down, it allows more deployment to occur. And as I talked about before, the ability to create an AC module and integrate the inverter with the module is something that Enexys brings to the party, and this is a major part of how this will change. It's become what I call, this industry is now moving to a second generation smarter industry that has changed its emphasis on cost per peak watt, theoretical efficiency under ideal conditions to focus really on harvested watts at lowest lifetime cost, which has been pretty hidden. It's indicative to me of the telecom industry that I've been involved in, and was referenced earlier. If you go back to the 90s, it's a monolithic environment and all of that, and it changed dramatically. And as that change occurred for the internet environment that we know today, the data college environment we know today, it's a very similar analogy, I think, to where we are in solar and the opportunities that exist out there. Plug and play AC modules, importantly, will empower rooftops to be a major part of the supply chain in a distributed generation mode, which can be residences up to small commercial buildings. And if you look around any place, there's just huge amounts of real estate available for solar, which have not been utilized. And a lot of that has been because of the complexity of the systems that exist today for solar. So, just in summary, Enexys, as a small startup company about to launch its first product, typical in some ways of starting several years ago with some technology ideas, spun out of the university with some PhDs, and now moving into what we think is mainstream deployment in the commercial world. Is set at a very excellent position to help drive this change. Thank you. Thank you.
All this morning's speakers to join us here for the panel discussion. Thanks to all of them for the concise way they managed to stick to the schedule.